So, of course, we've got Impact Wrestling Under Siege coming up on Impact Plus this Saturday. And the event's got a couple of big matches. It really does. It's got Kenny Omega teaming up with the Good Brothers to face off against Eddie Edwards and the Impact World Tag Team Champions, New Japan's Finn Juice. But arguably the biggest match on the show is going to determine Kenny Omega's next challenger for the Impact World Championship. It's a six-way #1 contenders match and features the likes of Chris Sabin, Chris Bey, Sami Callihan, Matt Cardona, Trey Miguel, and Moose to determine Kenny Omega's next challenger for the Unified Impact World Championship. So what I thought I would do in this video, we're going to touch on some Impact news after this, because former Impact Knockouts Tag Team Champion Kiera Hogan has mentioned some interesting comments about WWE that I do want to comment on. But what we're going to do in this video is briefly just go through the names of the names in this #1 contenders match this coming Saturday and determine which ones are likely, not likely, most likely to win the match and challenge Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship, the Unified Impact World Championship. So we're going to go through the names individually and try and figure this out. Now, this isn't going to be maybe it is a slight prediction video, I guess, but we are going to be doing a full Under Siege prediction video. We're going to do a preview video, and we will be doing a watch-along on Saturday for Under Siege. So if you do like the Impact Wrestling content we do on the channel, be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and you can join us on Saturday for the Impact Wrestling watch-along. If you click the notification bell, you'll be notified when we go live for the watch-along on Saturday nights too. So let's get into the names. Let's do it as we can see it on the screen there. So let's start off with Chris Sabin. Now, Chris Sabin is obviously synonymous with Impact Wrestling. What hasn't he done in Impact Wrestling? He's done everything in Impact Wrestling. He's been an Impact Tag Team Champion recently, of course, with Alex Shelley as the Motor City Machine Guns, but he's also been an Impact Wrestling Tag Team Champion in the past. Multiple-time X Division Champion. Of course, he's also been a former Impact World Champion, a TNA World Heavyweight Champion. Holds the same lineage, so he's been a former Impact World Champion. Do I see Chris Sabin winning this match? Short answer, no, to be honest. I think there are probably names in there that should win the opportunity to face Kenny Omega more than him. Put it this way, and this is probably the best way to look at this Under Siege Impact or #1 contenders match for the Impact World Championship, is that I don't see anyone that wins this match winning the World Championship when they have the match against Kenny Omega. I think that's probably important to stress there. I do have someone that I think is maybe the most likely to win the match, but out of all of these names, I don't see anyone winning the match and then defeating Kenny Omega because, and I spoke about it yesterday when we did the video talking about the names likely to defeat Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship. I don't see Kenny Omega dropping the Impact World Championship before Slammiversary in July, certainly. Personally, and my opinion hasn't changed on this, I think Kenny Omega drops the Impact World Championship in October at Bound for Glory. The reason why is because the key to Kenny Omega dropping the Impact World Championship is how long he holds on to the AEW World Championship. Now, obviously, last night on Dynamite, we found out who Kenny Omega is going to be facing at Double or Nothing later on this month. He's going to be facing Orange Cassidy and Pac in a triple threat match for the AEW World Championship. Looking at that match, I don't see either Pac or Orange Cassidy becoming the AEW World Champion, so I think that pretty much rules out Kenny Omega dropping the AEW World Championship before July, before Slammiversary. I can see Kenny Omega maybe dropping the AEW World Championship in late August, start of September, whenever they do All Out this year. That then opens him up to drop the Impact World Championship. Why? Because I don't think AEW want to have their world champion, the top guy in their company. They don't want to have him doing jobs to someone from Impact Wrestling. No disrespect to Impact, but they perceive it as a smaller company, a smaller promotion. They don't want to see their world champion putting over a talent from another company that it doesn't really benefit AEW. And I think that's the reason why. So I think he has to lose the AEW World Championship first. I think that happens in October. Therefore, my long-winded point is whoever wins this match, I don't think wins the Impact World Championship when they face Kenny Omega. Now, Chris Sabin, Kenny Omega would be a great match. It would be a great match. I think partially the problem with that is we kind of have already seen it. Obviously, we haven't seen the one-on-one match between Omega and Sabin, but we did see them share a ring in January at Hard to Kill when we had that six-man tag team match, Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers versus the Motor City Machine Guns and Moose. Well, it was meant to be, actually, I slightly got that wrong. It was meant to be the Motor City Machine Guns and Rich Swann. Alex Shelley couldn't compete due to being a frontline worker, so it was Chris Sabin, Moose, and Rich Swann get there in the end. So we kind of already have seen it, and as I mentioned before, Impact Wrestling should be aware that they've only got Kenny Omega for a select amount of matches. Kenny Omega's not going to stick around forever, so they need to get as many different talents facing off against Kenny Omega as possible. I think. And again, Chris Sabin and Kenny Omega have already shared the ring together, so I think it's unlikely that Chris Sabin wins this match. Chris Bey is the next one, as you can see next to Chris Sabin on that photo there. Now, Chris Bey was one of the names yesterday that I did say could potentially be the one to defeat Kenny Omega. Now, Chris Bey versus Kenny Omega, they haven't shared a ring together as of yet. Chris Bey's hyped it up on social media, saying that he's coming for Kenny Omega and he's coming for that Impact World Championship. I see Chris Bey as a future Impact World Champion. I think he really does have all the tools possible to become an Impact World Champion in the future. Right now, it's debatable. I think sometimes, though, with a talent like Chris Bey, you just need to give them the shove in the right direction. I think he does have the talent in the ring. I think he does have a really engaging character on television. I think that previously in the past you could say the criticism was, and maybe still is, when it comes to his character work and his promo ability. I think he needs to be given more chance to deliver promos. He does feel like a big star. When they were doing the qualifying matches for this was Chris Bey's big return to television for Impact Wrestling, and when he made his return, he felt like a big star. And the reason why he felt like a big star is because he can be a big star. He has all of the qualities capable and required to become a big star for Impact Wrestling. I truly believe that, being a big advocate for Chris Bey to be featured more in the main event position in Impact Wrestling. I was really glad to see him get the opportunity to face off against Rich Swann last December as part of Final Resolution. Of course, he was unsuccessful there, but I think they were kind of testing the waters, Impact, to see, can this guy sink or swim when he's put into the main event scene? I think he swam perfectly. So, do I think he'll win the match at Under Siege? I think he would probably be one of the names that I would consider to say, maybe that's the guy to win the match. Again, I don't think that Chris Bey, if he won this match, would defeat Kenny Omega, because I don't think anyone will that wins this match. But they could certainly build an Impact Plus event around a Kenny Omega versus Chris Bey match. So I wouldn't rule it out. Is he the person that I think will win it, though? If I had to put my neck out on the line and say, this is my prediction, this is who I think is going to win, I would say no, but I think he's a possibility. Sami Callihan. Could Sami Callihan be the one to win this match and face off against Kenny Omega? Well, I mentioned yesterday when I spoke about the Kenny Omega video that we did and who is the one likely to defeat Kenny Omega, Sami Callihan wasn't part of that list, because obviously he is a former Impact World Champion. He does have credibility. Kenny Omega's a heel, Sami Callihan's a heel. Now, I know Sami Callihan can sometimes switch like that into a babyface. He's kind of done it in Impact Wrestling before. I just don't know if I really truly have the desire to see Sami Callihan versus Kenny Omega. I know Kenny Omega can do maybe a bit more of a gritty and maybe a hardcore match. The problem is he's done them over the course of the last few months with Jon Moxley. There doesn't seem to be a desire to do that again here in Impact Wrestling, so I would kind of rule that one out. I think Sami Callihan's in the match because he adds credibility, he adds experience. The one thing that he does have going for him, and possibly why he could be a guy maybe to face Kenny Omega in the future, and I mentioned this yesterday, is that whoever defeats Kenny Omega, they be in Impact Wrestling, they can't make the mistake of giving that spot of the guy that defeats Kenny Omega becomes the Impact World Champion. They can't give that spot to someone that isn't going to be around for the next year or so. Because whoever defeats Kenny Omega, let's face it, whoever defeats Kenny Omega anyway becomes a big star for Impact. But also, they take with them the World Championship as well. They dethrone Kenny Omega. They bring back the World Championship to Impact Wrestling. They become the guy, the top talent on the male side of things in Impact Wrestling. That's what they become. Now, Impact Wrestling can't give that spot to someone that's going to be gone in 2 or 3 months. That's going to have a contract that's going to be expiring soon. Sami Callihan, we know he signed a new deal with Impact Wrestling at the end of last year. He is going to be around for the next couple of years or so at the very least. And he seems to be an Impact Wrestling guy at this point. I don't think he's going to go anywhere else. He was with WWE briefly. Obviously didn't work out for him in NXT. He's not going to go back there anytime soon. He was with MLW, left in controversial fashions. He's not going to go back to there anytime soon. AEW, I don't see where he fits on that roster right now. So he's an Impact guy. He's going to be with Impact for a long time, I think. So possibly you could say, well, if he's going to be an Impact guy, if he's going to be a guy that's going to be sticking around in the future, maybe Sami Callihan is the right guy. Again, whilst with a lot of these names in this match, all of these names in this match, to be fair, you could see as someone that could face Kenny Omega at, say, the next Impact Plus event, which we know is against all odds. Possibly it could be. But I just don't see it. So I'm going to rule out Sami Callihan there. Matt Cardona is a fascinating one, isn't he? Because part of the reason I would have thought that Matt Cardona came to Impact Wrestling and maybe didn't stick around in AEW for a long time, because he was there for AEW, signed a very short-term contract, was contracted to something like 6 dates, something like that. And then his last date was all out last year. And then he comes to Impact Wrestling later on that year. Oh, no, it was early on this year, Hard to Kill. The reason he came to Impact, I think, and this was one of the reasons when he was released by WWE, I was advocating for him to come to Impact, is because I think he sees where he can be most successful. And that's Impact Wrestling. Is he going to go to AEW and is he going to be an AEW World Champion? Not anytime soon. Is he going to go to AEW, maybe be a TNT champion? That division's incredibly competitive as well. You can see a talent like Miro. He won the TNT championship last night. And no disrespect to Matt Cardona, but he doesn't have the steam and the momentum that someone like Miro does. So that's why I was saying at the time, I think he needs to go to an Impact, maybe a Ring of Honor, because he can be a world champion there. And don't get me wrong, Kenny Omega versus Matt Cardona would certainly be an interesting match. I don't know right now if it's necessarily, though, a match that a lot of people are really desperate to see. I think when it comes to Matt Cardona, there's a bit more rebuilding to do and a bit more of interest to generate about his character. In a couple of months' time, if he really got some momentum and impact, you could say, well, Matt Cardona versus Kenny Omega, that could be great. I think fundamentally as well, and this is maybe the key element as to why I don't know if he'll win this match and certainly won't win the Impact World Championship, is I don't even know if he's got a contract with Impact Wrestling right now. As far as I'm aware, he's still on, if he's on a deal at all, it's incredibly short term, but as far as I'm aware, it's kind of a handshake deal. When he came into Impact Wrestling earlier this year, it was widely reported that he hadn't signed anything with Impact. He had spoken to Scott D'Amore, and it was kind of like, you come in to work this taping, you can then work the next taping. If you like it, maybe we can figure something out in the future. That's the way contracts work in Impact Wrestling, and they've kind of worked like that for a while now. That it's very rare that people through the door come in signing a contract. It's not impossible. W. Morrissey's just done it, where he came in, signed a deal, he's already with Impact Wrestling. But for a lot of talents like a Matt Cardona, who doesn't want to be tied down to something long term, he's just been in WWE for 10 years or maybe even longer, Impact Wrestling give them the opportunity to say, you can come in, we'll work it out as time goes on, just keep showing up to the tapings. If you like it, you can stay. If you don't like it, you can leave. The choice is yours. But because of that, I just don't know if he'd get the opportunity to get that big spot of defeating Kenny Omega, because he's not tied to the company. He could leave at any time, and that's just not good business. Now, another name there, you can see him next to him, is Trey Miguel. Trey Miguel versus Kenny Omega would be a match that I personally would be really interested in seeing. The whole point since Trey Miguel has come back to Impact has kind of been a redemption arc, really, hasn't it? That obviously his partner's left, Des and Wentz, and now they're in NXT. They're successful. He decided that NXT wasn't right for him right now because of family issues. He didn't want to relocate to Florida, and he didn't feel like it was the right opportunity for him. Obviously, Triple H said some things about him as well, saying, if you can't commit fully, then you shouldn't be here and all this kind of stuff. And I think that, rightfully so, rubbed Trey Miguel the wrong way. He's like, who are you to question my commitment to anything? The reason I'm not signing with the company is because I've got a commitment to my family. It's got nothing to do with pro wrestling or anything like that. So I still think at the time that those comments by Triple H were incredibly narrow-minded and didn't actually take account of the whole situation. There are things outside of the world of professional wrestling. There are things outside of WWE that other people have to consider when they sign a contract with the company. So he's come back to Impact, had a feud with Sami Callihan. He's made some great appearances. Obviously, he's transitioning into a full-on singles wrestler at this point. He was featured, obviously, in the Slammiversary match last year to determine the new Impact World Champion, so it's not as if he's not competed before for the Impact World Championship. I think there might have been a general consensus at the time. I think he was maybe the first guy eliminated from that match, that maybe he's just not ready for an Impact World Championship match then. I think he's closer now. I think he's establishing himself as a singles wrestler. Do I see him being the guy to win this match? I think he would probably be in the top two. And again, I'll give my prediction at the end. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Kenny Omega versus Trey Miguel. Again, I don't see anyone winning this match becoming the Impact World Champion because I don't think Kenny Omega drops the title anytime soon. But I think Trey Miguel, in terms of if you wanted to tell the whole redemption arc, could be very interesting. Again, the issue, I suppose, with Trey Miguel is the same issue with a Matt Cardona, is I don't know his contractual situation with Impact Wrestling right now. I don't know if he signed a long-term deal. I don't know if it's a case of his deal expired at the end of last year when the Rascals left. Obviously, Des and Wentz went to sign with WWE. They did. Trey Miguel came back and said, but I still don't really know what I want to do. Can I just come back and work TV tapings and we can figure something out? Similar to Matt Cardona. So I don't know if he necessarily has a full-time deal or any contract with Impact Wrestling right now. If he doesn't, again, I would look at this and say, it's kind of unlikely he wins because do you really want to be featuring guys that aren't even under contract and could leave tomorrow? Maybe it's a little bit hypocritical by what I'm going to say next about the next person, but we'll have to wait and see. Finally, as you can see there on the far right of the screen, Moose. This is the guy that I think wins it at Under Siege. Now, obviously, you would just say, well, didn't you just say about Trey Miguel and Matt Cardona and those names? If they're not signed to long-term contracts, why would you give them the opportunity? Well, we know that Moose's contract expires next month. He said it himself. His contract expires next month in June, and he said on Twitter that his big aim is to win the Impact World Championship, the Unified Impact World Championship, before his contract expires. Can that happen? I don't think it does, again, because I don't think Kenny Omega drops the championship before Slammiversary. Moose's contract expires in June. We don't even know if Moose is going to be at Slammiversary. I mentioned before, I've done a couple of videos talking about Moose at this point, and my gut feeling is that he will leave Impact. I do know he has strong ties to the company, and he does like it there. I just think, as I mentioned, given his background in the NFL, so his sporting background, given his physical transformation, given his radical improvement in the ring and on the microphone, I think he's quite a valued commodity for anyone at this point, especially Impact, but I think WWE would be interested. I think AEW would be interested. I think he has momentum. I think Impact Wrestling could have him win this match as maybe a vehicle to try and convince him to stay. You win this match, and I think he'd have the match against all odds because of the contractual situation. That could be Moose's final match for Impact. I think they could do it as a situation of Moose wins this, he faces Kenny Omega next month, and then they do a situation where it's title versus career, Kenny Omega wins, and then Moose leaves. Obviously, Moose then can come back to Impact Wrestling if they figure it out. Just because he leaves, not anything is set in stone in the world of professional wrestling. I just think that this is going to be maybe either the beginning of Moose's end in Impact Wrestling or the beginning of his eventual World Championship victory in Impact. But I don't think that will happen next month. So that would be my prediction. I think Moose would win this match. I'm really excited. I'm excited to see how it plays out. I don't know if they've mentioned that it's an elimination, if it's all single fall. You can let me know in the comment section about that. Obviously, the issue when you have these multi-man matches and lots of people in there is they can become a cluster quite quickly. I don't expect that to happen, though. There's some quite experienced heads in this one, and I'm excited for it. I'm excited for Under Siege in general. Now, finally, what I did want to talk about before we wrap things up was Kiera Hogan, and she has stated, obviously a former Knockouts Tag Team Champion, she has stated that she doesn't need to go to WWE to make it. Now, she recently was on a podcast where she discussed how the wrestling industry has changed. She noted that she doesn't feel like you need to go to WWE to make it anymore. This is what she had to say, quote, WWE is definitely the biggest of big. I mean, at one point, it was the only big wrestling company around, but now in 2021, there's like a bunch of big companies on TV. You don't necessarily have to go to WWE to make it per se. That was always my dream growing up because that's what I look forward to, but I also grew up watching Impact. Back then it was known as TNA, Total Non-Stop Action. I was a huge Knockout fan, like so big on the Knockouts because they were so different. They weren't cookie cutter. The girls had tattoos. They were doing hardcore matches. Like, these women were busting their asses. I was so obsessed, and I made YouTube videos about it as a kid. Like, I want to be a knockout. People need to recognize the knockouts and stop thinking that divas are it. Literally, I bled for those knockouts. Honestly, very interesting to finally see me here in this spot. Now, I do want to touch on another quote that she said here, when she said that she feels like the quote, the sky's the limit for her. Now, the only reason I laugh at that is obviously she was throwing major shots at Sasha Banks earlier this year, and that's Sasha Banks' theme song title. Yeah, it's very silly. But she then goes on to talk about how she does think that she's got a ton of potential and the sky's the limit for her. I'm a fan of Kiera Hogan's work. I wasn't necessarily massive on the whole Sasha Banks beef and all that kind of stuff that was going on earlier this year. I did make a video on it, so you can check that out on the channel. Wasn't big on her comments about all that kind of stuff, but that's in the past. I think she's maybe not. It's, again, she is partially right, I think. I think she's partially right in the sense that, do you need to go to WWE nowadays to make it and to make good money? No, you don't. And a lot of people now growing up don't necessarily want to go to WWE. A lot of people working right now would rather go to an AEW or an Impact over WWE. Not a lot, because the money, if you want to make big money, you tend to go to WWE. You can make it in AEW right now, but she's right. You can make a good living. Prior to the pandemic, I don't know what it's like now, you could make a really good living just living on the independent scene and maybe doing shots for Impact. You could make a really good living. And I think she is right. And as things get back to normal, we will probably see that again. You don't have to go to WWE. You don't. If you want to make big money, though, you do go to WWE. And I do question that If WWE made her an offer tomorrow, would she go to WWE? Maybe not. But if she got a bit of momentum and she thought she could make good money, like most professional wrestlers, they are independent contractors and they have to look at the company of one themselves. So do you need to go to WWE to make it nowadays? Absolutely not. We've seen so many stars. They might end up in WWE, but they make big names outside of it and then they come in. AJ Styles, Kenny Omega, the list can go on and on. So she's right, but it's certainly an interesting comment nevertheless. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Impact Under Siege and that big main event to crown Kenny Omega's next contender for the Impact World Championship? And what do you think about Kiera Hogan's comments that you don't need to go to WWE to make it in 2021 in professional wrestling? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.